So what judges do in sentencing, Andrea, is that they take into account a number of different factors before arriving at the sentence. This sentence that Ken has just told us about is a little bit below where I imagine her guideline sentencing range ended up. We haven't seen the precise calculation, but it looked like she was headed toward a range that would be about 5.5, maybe a little bit more years at the low end of the range. So this tells us that she carefully considered the factors, viewed them not in any sort of a political way, which would of course be inappropriate for a judge, was not out to hammer or to harm Stone, but rather fairly looked at the law and the facts in reaching a sentence which, as the law requires, is designed to keep him in prison for no longer than is necessary to achieve the underlying goals of federal sentencing. This is a fair sentence arrived at by a judge who took all of the relevant issues into consideration. It will likely stand up on appeal in the federal courts. The only issue will be whether the president decides to give Stone an outright pardon.
And Danny Cevallos, as a former defense lawyer and an expert on all of this, what would be the basis for an appeal, pending whatever the president is going to do and whether or not he intervenes before that stage?
First, as to the sentence meted out, keeping in mind I am a biased criminal defense attorney, and with great respect to my colleague Joyce, the sentencing guidelines themselves have been advisory since 2005. So we all talk about this guideline range. Should it be 87 to 103? Should it be 37 to 40 something? That guideline range is essentially arbitrary. Yes, it's arrived at by using a formula, but that formula is so fraught with inconsistencies it sometimes results in a statutory illegal sentence. So in Roger Stone's case, the more guiding principle should be statistics. What are the averages of offenders actually receiving? And what you find is that even a lower range, a 37 or 40-month sentence, is still much higher than the average offender with no criminal history who is sentenced as on an obstruction case like this. You find that the average for these offenders is less than 10 months. So Roger Stone, even at 40 months, and even though that's squarely within the guidelines range, or the original guidelines range, it's well below that range, it still is statistically an anomaly, strangely enough. The sentencing system we have is just strange. Ever since it's been rendered advisory, most of these sentences are below guideline sentences. So obviously, I'm a biased criminal defense attorney. I would take the position that this sentence, on the when compared to the averages, is still very harsh.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.